When you're starting out in sobriety, the unknown of it all can feel really overwhelming. Each day that goes by comes with questions like, is this normal? And will it always be like this? Sometimes it feels impossible to imagine what life could look like a month or a year from now. And that can cause some real anxiety. We get it. We've been there. We felt all those things. So we decided to gather up some people and have a conversation about what we wished we'd known in early sobriety. In this chat with Alex McRobert, Sober Yoga Girl podcast host, and Lucy Linger, film writer, director, and producer, our hope is that we'll set your mind at ease, make this all feel a little more possible, and let you know you're not alone.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Julie and Steve. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol.
If you're heading into dry January and aren't quite sure what you're going to do for a support system yet, we invite you to join us on Monday nights for our Sober Happy Hour on Zoom. We focus on small group discussions with 4 or 5 people per room to take the pressure off and give you a chance to find some real connection. You can get more information about what to expect, as well as login information, on our website at throughtheglassrecovery.com. All right, welcome everybody to Through the Glass Recovery podcast. It's so nice to be here today. We have 2 very special ladies with us that we have been chasing down for a while to get on this podcast. So really cool to have you both, and really cool to have you both on the same episode. And so we're going to go ahead and just start with our introductions, and then we'll take it from there. Alex, do you want to go first?
Amazing. Yeah. So my name is Alex. I have been sober from alcohol for about 5.5 years. It's going to be 6 years in April. Yeah. And when I quit drinking alcohol, I was a school teacher. I worked for international private schools in the Middle East. And that was where I initiated my sober journey. And then in the process of going alcohol free, I realized that, I didn't really want to be in that career. And I've ended up now in a career of, which I always wanted to do, which was yoga teaching. And I do retreats and trainings primarily out of Bali, which is where I now live, but I'm also pretty global. So I'm doing this podcast episode from Costa Rica right now.
Really cool. And do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about where they can find you and some of the cool stuff that you're doing also? Because I know you do lots of cool stuff.
Yeah. So I'm pretty active on Instagram at Alex McRobs is my Instagram account. The Mindful Life Practice is my website, and that's where all my yoga programs are. I have a podcast called Sober Yoga Girl Podcast, and I also just released a book, Sober Yoga Girl, and that's about my sober journey. And in terms of like where you can find me, I have lots of online offerings like yoga teacher trainings, philosophy, sober challenges. I also have retreats coming up this year in India, Bali, UAE, and so all of that you can find online.
Really cool. Well, we'll make sure we include those links for everybody in the show notes, and make sure you send me like a link to where they can get your book and all of that good stuff too. So cool. Well, it's nice to have you here. And then we also have Lucy with us.
Hi, I'm Lucy Linger. I'm coming from the UK. I travel a lot for work as well. I work in film and TV and theatre, and I have been sober for 2 years and 8 months. I'd say about. I don't have a date and I don't count the days. I know some people do and some people don't. I sort of have a vague idea of when I was like, I'm done with this, but that's kind of been my experience of it. And yeah, I work in film, TV, and theatre. I'm a writer, director, producer. So I'm kind of doing lots of stuff from the very beginning of an idea, sometimes even before a script, right the way through pre-production and then production and on set, and then all the way through post-production. I've got a short film that's coming out in early part of next year. That has been a crazy journey. It's a Scottish fairy tale, and it's everything. If you made a list of the things you're not supposed to do, it's kids, it's animals, it's VFX, it's computer generated dogs. It was, exterior night shoots in Scottish torrential rain weather. And I absolutely love it. I love all that kind of stuff. Anything that you're not supposed to be doing and that's supposed to be too ambitious and too challenging is right up my street. Um, and I also just recently did a stage play that I wrote and directed and staged in London at one of the oldest pub theatres in London, which I then decided to shoot, and I'm turning it into a feature film. So that's in post-production as well. That'll be out next year as well. And that was actually, interestingly, that was with our sober cast, which is my second time working with a sober cast. I don't advertise for it. I don't market myself as somebody who prefers working with sober actors. But yeah, this is now twice. And it's been really interesting because, traditionally several years ago, opening night, wrap parties, all of that kind of thing was such a big part of the industry. And now more and more you're seeing people who are stepping away from that and not interested. And we just had the most amazing run. We had the best time. We had kombucha, fizz to celebrate stuff, and we
Amazing.
swapped ideas of what we're drinking and how we're finding it. And yeah, it was wonderful, really good.
That is so cool. I love hearing that. I love all the little stories of like people just drinking less. It's spreading across the entire world, and I love that. Yeah, and I spent some time surfing your website a couple days ago, and you're a very busy lady. You're doing all kinds of stuff. So you both are, which it means we're really lucky to have you both here with us. So anyway, for our topic, there are going to be a lot of people removing alcohol from their lives really soon with the new year approaching. So we thought it would be a good time for all of us to reflect back on the early days of sobriety and talk about some of the things that in retrospect would have been helpful to know. So today's question is, what do you wish you would have known or could have known when you decided to quit drinking?
It was interesting actually when I heard this question. One of the first things I thought to myself was that it makes me feel a little bit like when I'm talking to teenagers and I want them to have the benefit of my experiences, but they can't because life is a journey and they are not ever going to have the perspective of somebody in their 40s when they are teenagers. And I feel a little bit like that about this question, that actually that it is a real journey, and there are lots of things that I think I'd love to talk about, and that I think it's a great topic to discuss. But there are things that I think that even if I'd been told, and there are some things that I probably was told, but I wasn't there and I wasn't in the headspace to hear it. And so I think that's probably would be my first thing that I wish I'd known, is that you have to get yourself in the headspace to hear and to understand what the journey is going to be, and what and it's individual for each of us. But yes, I sort of felt like that might be a good thing to start by saying as like a kind of caveat, is that for anybody listening, we may tell you things that you may have already heard, or that you just may not be ready to hear them. And then you may be sitting here in 2 years or 6 years or however many years thinking, well, I wish I'd heard that, but I actually did hear it. And didn't know what to do with it.
That's totally accurate though. I mean, I have a teenager, and there's so many things that I try to say to her, and she's just gonna have to have her own life experience. I think like and this goes along with what you were saying. I think one of the things that I didn't realize in the beginning was like, it's not that you just quit drinking and then you've quit drinking and you're done and now you're sober, right? Like you were saying, Lucy, it is a journey. And everybody's going to have their own journey, but once you start on it, like you're going to stay there for the rest of your life. And I couldn't wrap my head around that in the beginning. I just figured I just need to quit drinking and get okay with life sober, and then I can move on and whatever. So really good point.
I love that point, because that really made me think about the amount of things that I've encountered later in my journey that I probably encountered in the early days. And so I love that kind of reframe of it. But I'll say the immediate thing that I thought of when I saw this was when I first went alcohol free, I joined a community because I saw a bunch of, Facebook ads for it. And it was wonderful. It was like a great first intervention. But I didn't realize that there was like so much out there in the sober world. I didn't realize like how many books there were, how many podcasts there were. And I remember I must have been 60 days into my sobriety when I came across the unexpected joy of being sober, which was the first sober book I read, which I was like, oh my God, this is like gold. And then I slowly was like, wait, there's like a huge genre. There's so many books like this. And that was my immediate thought was when I first went alcohol free, I felt very isolated in my journey. And I think what I wish I knew right at that early point was that there is such a big community out there. And I just had to like keep it diving into it and exploring until I found that exact fit for me.
Yeah, exactly where you belong.
There's the first thing that comes up for me, and this goes along with what you're saying, Alex, is the first thing that comes up for me was the first one is I wish I knew that there was more than just AA, because literally that's the first place I went, because that's all I thought that existed. I had never looked for help until the day I quit. I never researched it. The only thing I researched beforehand was my side effects to my drinking and how bad they were, so I could judge whether I was going to be okay or not. That was it. Like the bruise that was on the side of my body that I didn't know where it came from. Like, what is that? That's as much as I Googled. So there was, what is more than AA, because there's so much more out there that you can explore. And if you don't identify with it, if it's not something that you connect with, there's so many more options. And the other one is that withdrawals were nasty. That you can actually go and get help if you have severe there's things that you can go and do and actually get help to help you through that, instead of just like I white knuckled my way through the whole thing. So, I mean, maybe I wish I knew that. And this is like the whole dichotomy of this whole thing, right? You wish you knew it, but had you not experienced it, then it wouldn't be valuable.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So it's like one of those, I wish I knew, but I also don't want to give that experience up either, because like Lucy said, it's the journey.
So true.
And that is the thing. I think everybody's journey is so individual, and it depends what your relationship with alcohol was at the time that you decided to quit, where you were, what your friendship group is like, what your family situation is like, what your work, all of those things. This is one of the things that I think that was the main thing that came up for me, is like I kind of felt like I was just going to just give up alcohol, and that was what it was going to be about, and whether it was going to be a bit tricky here and there. And I just had no idea that it was going to be such a massively, like, the eye-opening is too small. It's like me opening. It was a me opening experience, like in terms of me, self-discovery and authenticity and learning about my own emotions and my connecting, those kinds of things. Like I had no idea that any of that was going to happen. But the way it happened for me was that when I wanted to have a drink, I would ask myself why, like as part of my reason for stopping. And I just discovered all these reasons for why I was drinking. And, oh, I don't really like that. I don't like the fact that I feel like I'm a loud person that can be irritating to other people, and I prefer them to think I'm drunk, and that's why I'm so annoying, rather than having to sit in myself and be like, this is just who I am. I'm not even drinking. I'm just this loud. I'm just this chatty and friendly. If you don't like it, I'm probably not for you. But those kinds of things, that's what I feel like is the journey that, in terms of what I wish I'd known, the irony is I wish I'd known how little I knew about what I was opening up when I decided to do this. And I think that's one of the things that if somebody is kind of like toying with the idea, like, it's interesting you were talking about you living in Bali now and you traveling a lot. I feel like there's a traveling parallel there where it's like, oh, maybe I'll go on holiday. Like, I want to go to Bali. I've never been before. Somebody could do that. And then when they get there, they're like, oh my God, I hate my job. Oh my God, what am I doing in this awful marriage? Like, it can be completely transformative. And I think that's what I wish I'd known, that if I'd have done this years ago, I would have had that life-changing experience all those years ago. And so I feel like somebody who's younger maybe listening and thinking about having a go, like, do it for a year. Just do it for a short period of time, because you'll open that door. And once you go through, it's like, there is a whole playground in there that you get to discover.
That you can't even imagine, right?
Absolutely.
I say that fairly frequently on here. Like, I wish that I could, talking to somebody who's on day one, I wish I could hand them a photo album of what their life is going to look like in just 1 year, because
Mm.
they can't even imagine, like, they can't even pull up the ideas of how different their life is going to look and how differently they're going to feel about themselves. You can't even, like, express that in a way that someone could grasp. They've just got to operate on faith. But man,
Mm.
the change is incredible.
And I wish I'd known about the health side benefits of it as well. I thought I would feel healthier, but all my menopausal symptoms have gone completely, all of them. All my hot flushes, everything that I was experiencing. And so when I talk to women my own age and they are sharing issues they're having with menopause and going on to HRT and all of these medications that they're having to take, and I couldn't take any HRT because I'd had breast cancer when I was 29, and so I wasn't able to have any kind of hormone therapy. And I've done bits and pieces with diet and exercise, but absolutely the best thing I've ever done, it was getting rid of the alcohol. It was just so straight, and then I've got other health issues that I've been dealing with my whole life. My autoimmune symptoms are much more improved. My anxiety is better. Like, I'm at my best weight that I've been at for years. Like, I felt like I was going to feel healthier, but I mean, it's just been life changing. And I think it can take a while, like you were saying about, if people are going through withdrawals and if you're, you know, in a very, very difficult situation, it can take time. And people do sometimes feel worse before they feel better. There's just no getting around that fact. But ultimately, I think, the health benefits that you actually feel on a day-to-day basis are just incredible.
So, one of the things that's changed for me now is, and I don't know that you could tell me this, and because I think a lot of this is, the more I think about it, it's like you got to feel your way through this. And so, like, you talk about the health benefits, but my resilience has changed big time. Like, you're gonna have to experience and teach yourself some resilience one way or another through this, because it gets worse before it gets better. And now when I realize it gets worse, when it's getting worse, I'm like, okay, I'm running into my wall. I'm running into this space now where it's getting worse. There's something I need to do. And then when I start taking an action, it starts to get better. And then I can rinse, wash, and repeat that whole cycle over and over again and continue to overcome little things. And nobody tells you you're just going to overcome. Once you just overcome the alcohol, it's the first hurdle of the many little hurdles that you're going to welcome to the mountain,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? Welcome to figuring out yourself. Had you told me 3.5 years ago I'd be 1,600 miles away from home, Alex, you're farther from home than I am. But had somebody had told you that, you probably wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I wouldn't have believed that I would be back in school 3.5 years ago. Had you told me that, I would have told you were nuts. And so, like, the health benefits alone, taking that one thing out, my brain feels better, literally.
Yeah, and I think that has a knock-on effect to relationships as well, that you have
Yeah.
even trying relationships, and relationships that where the other person is still involved in alcohol and you're not, like, it's like being two people on a raft each trying to have a relationship, and then one of you steps on solid ground, and even though the other one is still on the raft, you are at least able to take control of yourself and stand firmly on the solid ground. And I feel like that's been really interesting in terms of the relationships that you have with people and their relationship with alcohol, that you having that separation. In one of the sober groups that I belong to, this question comes up so much, like, what do I do with my partner? What do I do with my, my girls that I have such a great night out with? I'm going to be kind of ostracized, and I'm going to be the party pooper and all those kinds of things. And I think that is part of the journey of navigating that, and choosing yourself over what anyone else thinks. And that makes you feel like a grown up. That's what I think is fun about it. That's again why I felt like I kept coming back to this idea of like the teenagers and wanting them to, to have that understanding, because you feel like, actually, I feel like a grown up now, where I'm like, do you know what? If you don't like it the way I am, then that's the way it is. And if you want me to drink and I don't want to drink, then you're being an idiot, really. And so I'm done, like, and that kind of thing I think is interesting and comes from exactly what you're talking about, that reality, getting real with yourself.
Absolutely. On the kind of the life-changing health benefits, when I went alcohol free, so when I was young in my 20s, I was diagnosed with a mood disorder, and I had been taking daily medication for years for that. And when I went alcohol free, it was a slow process. It wasn't like an overnight thing, but it was like this deep realization of like, oh my gosh, maybe I actually don't have a mood disorder, and maybe I'm just like in a really terrible job, in a really terrible circumstance, drinking a lot of alcohol, in terrible relationships. I've had a complete perspective shift on how I see the entire world, because I thought that I had this incurable illness. So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I thought that I was forever going to see the world in these extremes of like depression and mania, and that was never going to stop. And then in going alcohol free, I actually realized like this is actually like really manageable through my yoga practices, through being sober, through eating well, through going for walks. And I don't think I ever would have. So I don't take the medication anymore that I used to take. I took it for 8 years every day. And that's just been transformative for me. And so like that, and then as well, like you were saying, Steve, like I would have, if you had told me that I would start my own business and move to Bali and just be traveling full time around the world, like I would have literally thought you were crazy. Like I had this conversation with a guy this morning, and I went to his yoga class in Costa Rica, and I told him about my, my online business, and I was kind of talking him through the journey of like how I got to here. And it all starts with getting sober. It all does, because I was teaching yoga well beyond that, but I never would have the drive, have the perspective, have the ideas, have the vision beyond what I was previously doing until I was on a sober journey and just had the creativity and the discipline and the focus, the inspiration.
I feel like when you remove alcohol from your life, everything opens up. You see things differently, like plain and simple. And I think that's what it is. I see things differently. I started to, and then I started to do things differently, because you see things differently. But everyone tells you like it's super simple. Just stop drinking. Don't do that anymore. And then you experience all of these weird different shifts. And I have no idea what to do with them, because past evidence tells me that this is what I used to do.
One of the simplest things that I had to figure out, and it took longer than it probably should have, emotions pass on their own. You don't have to do anything to make an emotion pass. You definitely don't have to drink to make it go away. And I don't think I had ever actually experienced that, like allowed myself to experience, here is this really difficult, painful emotion, and then also allow it to just move away on its own. I would drink every hard emotion away. And so I had to realize, like, I had to be able to sit there and tell myself, this is temporary and it will pass. And it seems so simple, but for someone who had never allowed myself to experience any emotions, that was actually really important concept that I came to understand.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. And I think it's interesting how, you're talking about your yoga that you're into and the way that mindfulness and meditation and these kinds of things quite often just you get these recurring topics with people that once you stop drinking, you have to face things as they come at you. But what's interesting, I feel like when you talk about that idea of like a mountain that you're climbing, I didn't realize that I was climbing a mountain in like a spacesuit, and I was doing all of this stuff. I was running, a theater company. I was running setting up a film production company. I was running a costume hire business, like in a retail costume hire business. Like I was doing so much stuff, but I was just drowning in a way, and I was wearing this big heavy suit. And now I get to take that suit off and I'm dressed in like running clothes or mountaineering clothes or however you want to go with the metaphor. I'm actually got the stuff that I need to be able to do. I've got rid of all of this peripheral crap that I've been having to carry. Now, I don't know if you guys know the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. I have a story over here where it's a guy, the metaphor is this emperor is actually naked, but everyone's cheering these amazing clothes that he's wearing, and this person who's in the crowd who's like going along with it even though they can clearly see that the emperor is in fact naked. And that's how I felt about alcohol, and that's one of the things I really wish I'd known before. Is I feel really stupid coming out the other side and feeling like, how dare I? I don't wear branded clothes, really. I don't care about fancy cars, but I allowed alcohol branding to tell me I have to have champagne when I celebrate an anniversary. I have to have a beer when I'm going to the beach with my friends on holiday, and I have to have drinks, alcohol with football, and I have to have this, and I have like all the different, all the different branded alcohol, and it's all the Emperor's New Clothes. It's all poison. It's all rubbish. It's all nonsense. And yet I kind of really bought into it. So that's one of the things I feel like I didn't realize that I would feel stupid for buying into the whole culture and being part of something that, on its worst, it increases domestic violence. It causes death. It causes drunk driving. It has all of these negative societal kind of effects. Never mind the effects on me and my mental health and my physical health. And I was like part of that. I was there in the crowd cheering these this like complete load of nonsense. And so that I feel a lot of pride now that I'm like nothing to do with that part of society, and that thing that I think a lot of people do feel like, oh, well, I just have a glass of red wine with my dinner every night. What's the harm in that? But once you're dependent on something, you have to have it every night, or you can't go to a friend's birthday or for a wedding or any thing that should be fun on its own. You can't do it without alcohol. You've bought into that branding and that advertising that and it's just messing with you the whole time. So
It's when your language changes from I'm just going to have a beer to I need a beer. I need a glass of wine. It's that one simple switch in the word. Oh, I need a drink right now. It's like, oh crap. That's red flags. And I'm sure that I don't know when in my journey I went from, oh, I just want a beer with dinner to I need to have a beer with dinner when I'm out barbecuing or whatever that may be, right? That need turns into I got to make sure there's beer at home. I got to make sure I don't run out. I got to make sure I continue to meet that need.
For myself, there's little markers when I can look back on my journey, and it's really interesting. Like there were, because I was living in the Middle East at the time when I was sober, and there was one occasion I think it was 2016 when I was with my mom. We were doing this desert tour, and there was going to be a campsite where you couldn't have alcohol for those 2 nights. And like I remember in 2016, that was like not a problem for me. Like I think I was the one who said to my mom, like, hey, we're going to be at this alcohol-free campsite. Like it was fine to be alcohol-free for 2 nights. And somewhere between 2016 to 2019, when we were in the same situation but in a different country, this was like a problem for me. And I was like packing my bags with alcohol to bring with me to, these places where I couldn't drink. And I could not see that at the time, like the timeline, I didn't make that connection until into my sobriety, where I was like, wow, there was like a real shift along the way somewhere there.
Mm. Yeah, I remember smuggling stuff into festivals. We used to smuggle a lot of alcohol with like big pouches of wine. Used to take the bladder out of a wine box and put it down someone's trousers, smuggle it into the festival. Then everyone's just drinking warm red crotch wine and like, oh, the this isn't a problem that we have here, that we all need to do this. And I had a really funny experience just after I got sober, where we went to a festival and I went 2 days. And this first day, all they had was like Fanta and Coke and Sprite, like all full of sugar, and they didn't have any real alcohol-free alternatives, which I was really like annoyed about. So the next day, I like smuggled in a bottle of kombucha and a couple of bottles of like flavored sparkling water. And my husband was like, "What is this that we're smuggling in water in to get so that you can have something nice to drink?" And I was like, "Exactly." But so often the alcohol-free choices that is getting a lot better, but particularly at festivals and things like that, it's all for kids. So it's all like, I mean, it shouldn't really be super high sugar for kids anyway, but there's nothing, those kind of places need to catch up. Because if you go to really nice wine bars or you go to decent pubs, certainly here in the UK now, and I found around the world, like you can buy kombucha, you can buy alcohol-free beer, you can get, you know, um, alcohol-free cocktails. It's becoming more and more and more popular, I think.
The first time I quit drinking, I didn't even realize non-alcoholic beer was an option until I was almost a year sober. So I have you ladies probably don't know, but I have two separate stints of sobriety. So the first time I was almost a year, and then I finally discovered there was non-alcoholic beer. And it felt like such a treat. And I don't drink a lot of it, but it is something that's nice to have every so often. And I think it works really well for a lot of people to kind of fill that need when you're out with friends or you're out doing things, that there are some really great non-alcoholic alternatives out there now. And I wish I would have known that earlier on, because I think that would have like smoothed some of the edges in certain situations. And I know it's not for everybody. There's going to be some people listening that are going to start yelling at their phone while they're listening to this, because so many people are anti NA beer, but for some people it really is a helpful tool that I didn't know was there for a long time.
And learning that tools are okay, I think, as well. Like, I remember having a conversation really early on where someone said, "Isn't that cheating if you drink an alcohol-free beer?" I was like, "At what? I'm not playing a game. It's my life. It's whatever I want." Like, why? And people do, like, that I think that's really important. If someone else is saying, "Oh, you shouldn't have alcohol-free beer," well, no, go away. I should have whatever I want. And, it's my journey and what I'm doing. And again, that all feeds into that feeling of taking a bit more ownership and not just going with the flow. But then equally, as you say, like, I think that's another thing I wish I knew, like having tools in place will be really helpful early on. So like, I really do have a thing where we like, especially probably from my work, open a bottle of champagne, opening night and, wrap parties and all that kind of thing. And I discovered a kombucha that's bottled in the same way with the actual champagne pop. And that's just been fantastic. I have that at Christmas, I have it at my birthday, and that, whatever part of my brain is left that feels like I'm being deprived of that pop woohoo kind of fizz that people have, it feels it. It's a tool that feels it, because alcohol isn't just about the substance, it's about the culture, it's about the story that we're taught about what things are a treat. And when you have what, and oh, this is nice with a steak, and this, all of those kinds of things. And I think that's something it took me a while to find all of those things. I think that would be a good thing to have known. you know it's okay to have substitutes for those things that are culturally important to you. And the ritual, that's what it is really, isn't it? It's the ritual
The
of
ritual,
like
yeah.
pop and pour and toast and cheers and all those things that are such a part of our culture, that are what people worry about missing out on, I think, to some extent.
I just spent a week last week actually staying at a friend's place who was a big drinking buddy. And even 6 years into this, like, I don't think I would have gotten through that if I didn't have I had a case of Heineken Zero, and I was drinking with him, drinking my Heineken Zero while he drank. And I think if I didn't have an alternative, like there were multiple times when I wanted to drink with him because I just wanted to connect in the same way that we used to. And if I didn't have that alternative, I would have maybe drank. I hope to say that I wouldn't have, but I was definitely at like breaking points, and then came to a conclusion at the end that I probably should not put myself in that situation.
And well, there's the thing though, right? This whole conversation we've talked about having the experience and having that be part of your journey, and then you had just had that as part of your journey, and you're like, whoa, okay. And every time you get to another whoa, okay moment, then I get to have a choice of what am I going to do differently.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. It's
And
pretty amazing to think like, because there's some people that say like, oh yeah, I got sober and I just never looked back, and I think about it again and my life has moved on, and I definitely find that I still have these moments, and so
nostalgia moments.
yeah, and so I think even a show like this that we're doing today for like, what do I wish I knew in my early days, this is like tremendously beneficial for me to rehear all of these things of like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why is this important? And so I think it's of great value of people at any stage in their journey.
Mm. It made me really reconnect with who I was as a teenager, but I was really surprised by, like, really early on, I went to see Alanis Morissette with my girls from school in concert, and I drove them all exactly as I would have done when I was, like, 17. I wouldn't have given a monkey's about the fact that I couldn't drink 'cause I I was, free. I was out, away from my parents, driving me and my friends on our own to see a concert, and that would have just blown my mind and was amazing. And it was so nice because that's exactly how I felt. Again, I was enjoying it for the music, for the company, for the fun of it, for being out, and then, people are queuing to pay like 10 quid, which is like, $14 or whatever for not even a full pint of beer. And then you've got to keep going to the loo and you miss her favorite song because the alcohol has made you, need the loo so much more and all those. And I just felt like, I say, really felt reconnected to when I was younger, and you just go to events and you go to things and you enjoy them for themselves rather than you actively see how are we going to get home because we're all going to be drinking, and who's going to go to the bar, and when are we going to miss this, that, it just because you don't realize, I don't think, when you're in it, because the drinking is such a part of the evening. But when you're then on the outside looking in, you're like, wow, wouldn't it be better if you just had a bottle of water and could just dance all night and not worry about that, you know?
One of the things that you're making me think of with that, like that, how much time we spent on alcohol. And it wasn't just the amount of time that we were actually consuming it, but how much time were you thinking about drinking it? And how much time were you worried about like going and getting it? And then, the hangover in the morning. Like, if I look back and I'm really honest with myself, I probably lost 10 hours a day to either thinking about alcohol, acquiring alcohol, drinking it, suffering the effects, or being hungover, right? Like a good 10 hours of each day. So when you quit, and this was fascinating to me both times that I quit drinking, there's so much free time. Like, you think that you were just filling a couple hours with alcohol, but you're so wrong. And like going into those first couple of months, especially, it felt like days just went on and on forever, especially the evening hours. Like, it would be 6 o'clock. And I would just like, can I go to bed yet? Like, because we've been doing this for way too long today. And having hobbies and activities and ways to spend your time and things to do, like, it does not matter what you're doing. Take up puzzles, take up Sudoku, take up bread baking like Steve did. Like, you need way more hobbies than you think you need. And you don't have to do them forever. But that was one of the most uncomfortable things for me that I wasn't anticipating when I quit drinking, was just how much freaking time there is in one day, when it seems like every 5 minutes you're just thinking, can I have a drink? I want to have a drink. I can't drink, And yeah, it was brutal for the first month or two.
So you bring up something for me when I'm listening to you, Julie. And one of the things that I wish I knew was to stop fighting how I feel. Because the longer I fought it, the more intense that feeling I was fighting got. And to go along with this one is the other one is it's okay to feel negative emotions. Like there's nothing actually wrong with me. Because I used to say this all the time. Like, what is wrong with me? Because I'm not experiencing this thing the way I thought I was supposed to experience. So what is wrong with me? There is nothing wrong with me. I'm fighting the actual experience that I'm having, and I'm not accepting that that's what's going on. So I'm creating my own misery. And I didn't know that. I didn't know I was the creator of my own misery, even though I was inside of it. Like I got stuck in this loop of I'm feeling bad. I need to do something now to unfeel this bad. It's uncomfortable. And because I didn't know how to soothe, and because I didn't know how to talk about it, and I didn't know how to do all of these things, it made it a lot more difficult. Now, comparably speaking, when I feel off, when I feel down, when I feel low, when I feel depressed, when I feel angry, when I feel frustrated, I don't go, shit, I need to turn this off. I go, wow, okay, this is how I'm feeling. Interesting. Now I get to ask myself introspective questions. Where is this coming from? Why am I feeling this way? What is this actual feeling I'm experiencing? As opposed to just having this internal war over this feels bad, make it go away. Because it was very, very simple at the beginning. And I think you can still simplify it. This feels bad. Okay. I'm going to sit with it instead of fight it and just try and acknowledge its existence. If I can just do that, I'll move past it way faster.
Which is so much easier said than done.
Oh, I know it's so much easier said. It absolutely is. But like,
no, you're spot on. It's just tough. I'm trying to, like, it's so hard to explain that to someone.
It's hard to give someone that gift until you're done, until you get frustrated enough with yourself because you're fighting with yourself over the way that you feel.
You have to do the work yourself. I think that's part of it. And I think that's the other thing I didn't really realize is the knock-on effects of that. Like one of the things I found really interesting is differentiation is something that like has cropped up to me, like the way that we're so enmeshed with the people that we love. And, you know, me and my husband would sit and drink wine and solve all the world's problems. And that was like a part of our lives. My family drink wine, you know, when we have like family occasions. You know, and I'm so close with all of those people, and we're all very enmeshed. And suddenly you're saying, "Oh, I want to be different to everybody else," and so differentiating yourself out of those behaviors, you feel like you're like severing a tie that you have, a bond that you have with that person. One of the ways I found really useful and interesting to do that is to remove drinking and alcohol from the conversation. So with me and my husband, we would both just get our own drinks. We would sit the same way we did in the same chairs, talking about the same things, putting the world to rights, solving the same problems. But I would have his drink, and I wouldn't ask him what his drink was, and he wouldn't ask me what my drink was because it's irrelevant. It's not that tiny bit where he says, "Do you want a glass of wine?" and I say, "Oh yeah, go on then," and he gets one. Is the tiniest bit of the evening, and if you can just remove that little tiny hurdle for a while, and sit and still see, like, look, we still love each other. Look, we still want to have these conversations. Now, yeah, if he's going to sit there and drink half a bottle of gin and I'm drinking my sparkling water, we're not going to be on the same page and we're not going to have the same evening. But also, what's interesting about differentiation is when you pull away slightly, the people that really love you and are really bonded with you, they will make changes. They will make adjustments to bond with you. So my husband now, he wouldn't drink half a bottle of gin when we're sitting together because then we would be off kilter from his. So he might go out with the lads and drink a whole bottle of gin for all I care. Like he can do what he wants to do, but we make adjustments together. And that took me time to realize that actually, you know, you have to differentiate yourself from what everyone else is doing. And that then has those knock-on effects where it's like, actually, what other things am I doing because I'm going with the crowd, or because, and it gives you, like you were saying, that the time to reflect on things a bit more and be like, no, do you know what? I do that and I don't really enjoy it. That's not how I don't want to be doing that thing. And it might be nothing to do with alcohol. You just suddenly have these other revelations, like you were saying, leaving your job, getting out of bad relationships. It has such a big knock-on effect. I could never have imagined 3 years ago, I would never have imagined I would be a person who would be not drinking alcohol ever again. I would have been like, how is that even going to work? What is that even going to look like?
Doesn't add up in my life right now.
What is it going to look like? And what exactly, coming back to what you were saying, you want to give someone a photo album. That's what I feel like. I want to go back to that person and say, what it's going to look like is this. You're going to be, over a stone lighter, and you're going to be so happy, and you're going to have, so many opportunities. And this is what it looks like. But I would never have been able to imagine that. And I think that is really where I sort of started with this topic. I just thought it's so hard to imagine how it's going to be, the journey.
Well,
Absolutely.
Do you got anything else to say, Julie?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to wrap this one up. But one of the things Julie says, especially to somebody new in this journey, I wish I could give them a photo album of what your life could look like if you just removed alcohol. And I think that wraps up literally everything all of us have shared, is that as soon as we removed alcohol from our life, and this episode is going to come out for January 1st. We got dry January, New Year's resolutions, all of that stuff. And I hope our listeners heard something that they can connect with. Hope. I hope they heard some hope. If you're going to remove alcohol from your life, that first 30 days, just start there. Yeah. Just start there and see if you feel better at the end of January. And if you want to keep feeling that way, you want to keep feeling better, because listening to all of you share, it gets better. And that's the one thing that is so hard to give to anyone else. Is just, it keeps getting better. Even after, Alex, I'm seeing you smile right now. And even after 6 years, what would you say?
Yeah. It just keeps getting better.
It just keeps getting better. And Lucy, it sounds like it's the same for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that the scarier it is as an idea, and the harder it is, the more you need to think about that and why that is. Because that's the thing. If you're like, oh my God, I can never imagine my life without alcohol. Well, that's says something about your life with alcohol at the moment. And it's worth exploring that. And that's what I think is curiosity. Like you were saying yourself, Steve, that curiosity is the step. Like, what am I like without it? What is this like? What is it like? Get playful with it. Become a kid again. Like, really look into who am I if I don't drink, and if it's really that difficult, that's something that's worth exploring, I think. And like you say, those 30 days that of dry January, that's how I started with Sober October. Actually, over here, I did it 2 years in a row, and I realized on the third year I was so looking forward to it. I was like desperate. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait for Sober October, because I knew how good it was going to make me feel. And I was like, why then? Why is no alcohol? There's any reason saving up?
That's funny.
The insanity of it all, isn't it?
Certainly, that's you are. That's how much I believe those Emperor's New Clothes were amazing.
Well, I have to say, it has been an absolute pleasure to sit down with you, Lucy, and you, Alex. It's been great to meet you both. It's been awesome to finally see both of your smiles. So thank you very much for showing up and sharing and being a part of this podcast. Really appreciate you too.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been great.
So much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks to our listeners for being here too. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow Through the Glass Recovery on whatever platform you're using to listen, and you'll be the first to know when next week's episode drops. See you then.